to order. Pledge of Allegiance, everyone, please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You guys could have unmuted for that one. Okay. Any changes to the agenda?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Do we have a motion to adopt the agenda?
Motion to adopt agenda.
Motion by Timmerman.
Second, Novak.
Sorry, let's do that again. Who wants to second that?
I'll second.
All right, second by Seepersod. All in favor? Well, we'll do a roll call vote. I'll vote aye. Kate?
Hello.
You vote to approve the agenda?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
It's all right. Josh?
Aye.
It's Josh. Let's go to Seepersod
Aye.
and Novak.
Aye.
All right. Motion passes. Agenda is adopted. Presentations, proclamations, and acknowledgements. We do not have any, I don't believe.
No, we do not, Mr. Mayor.
Public comment. Is anyone on that would like to speak under public comment? Commissioner Wolf?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Thanks for joining
Great.
us.
Yeah, I just have a couple of things, Mr. Mayor and council members. So we have I've been sending out reports to you and Tom Terry about this coronavirus, and we also have some good stuff on our website and the Minnesota State website of Health and Human Services if you want any more answers. It's funny how a month ago I was at your place and gave you a little update, and by the time I walked out the door, I got a new email saying everything that I had told you people was all opposite. So our building over at the county is well ahead of schedule because we've had some nice weather here. The road projects in the county are going full steam ahead, which includes your 2191. We just voted on that and accepted that on Tuesday. At the county now, in all the counties, they're talking about delaying tax payments, property tax payments until August 15th. It would be a monumental task to do because a lot of people actually already escrowed for their taxes, and some cities don't carry large amounts of dollars on their bottom line, on their balance sheet, so they don't have the money to float till that time. So, and Hennepin County alone has like 300,000 or 400,000 properties. It would be very tough to manage. So as for right now, it sounds like May 15th. I don't know, maybe Tom Terry, I don't know if Leslie Vermillion or somebody from the office had talked to you about that.
Yep. There was a question going around with various administrators about how far they could float on reserves within for first half settlement. And basically, after taking a look at it with Ellie, we could, based on normal expenses, go to maybe 3 months before we'd start to get really cash thin, and that was pretty similar for most of the cities.
Yep. Okay. So we're working on that. Some people are having a harder time than others with that. So, and then the last thing I have here is slow down on the roads. There have been a large amount of car crashes, more than normal. During this period last year, there's twice as many like deadly car crashes in the metro area as there were last year at this time. And there's about 80% less traffic. Because there's so little traffic, people, I think, are just driving as fast as they want to, and that's no good. So it's still illegal to text and drive and to talk on your phone, not hands-free while you drive. So that's my report. Thank you.
Commissioner Wolf, appreciate it. Does anyone have any questions for Commissioner Wolf?
Kate had her hand up.
Kate?
Yes.
Nope, I guess not. So,
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Commissioner Wolf. Have a good night.
Yep, I'll be on mute.
Okay. All right, on to consent agenda. Does anyone have any items they would like to discuss or have pulled from consent agenda? Hearing none. Any motions to adopt the consent agenda?
Motion to adopt the consent agenda.
Motion by Berg,
Second.
second by Timmerman. All in favor, we'll do a roll call vote. I'll start and vote aye. Timmerman,
Aye.
Berg,
Aye.
Seepersod,
Aye.
Novak.
Aye.
All right, consent agenda passes. Public hearings, we don't have any. Next would be general business. Tom.
Mr. Mayor, for general business tonight, we have a request to have the council authorize issuance and sale of close to $5 million in general obligation bonds related to several capital improvements and purchases. The council is being asked to adopt resolution 2027, which would authorize the sale. We have with us tonight Terry Heaton, our financial advisor, to talk about the bond sale.
Good evening. I don't know if my picture's coming up. Oh, I know why. I have it taped up as an emergency backup. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. This evening, do you want me to just roll right into the PowerPoint, Tom?
Yep, you can just tell me when to advance.
Okay. So this evening, we are asking the City Council to consider and approve moving forward with the sale of bonds. The makeup of those bonds are starting on the top, a $4,965,000 general obligation bond made up of several components. The first is the police facility, which is approximately a $2 million project, and included is in the bond materials is a 20-year term and a 15-year option. The Roundabout Street reconstruction project at $1,205,000. And included in the packet is a 20-year term, but we also have a 15-year option attached. Next is the equipment certificates of $790,000 repaid over 10 years. Next slide. Pavement rehab improvement project, $600,000. It's partially supported by assessments. And that is repaid over a 10-year term. Can everybody hear me?
I
Okay.
can hear you. There is someone that there's an echo somewhere somehow,
Okay.
but not from you, Nessa.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
You can? Okay. And then a sewer on-site generation project of $242,700, a 15-year term. And then we're looking at the difference between a 20-year bond and a 15-year bond. We said there were two options. One is 3.3%, 3.03%, and the other is a 15-year option. Lower interest rate because you pay it off faster, but it will cost more over time, as you'll see. The next slide shows the components that are all issued in one bond issue to save cost of issuance. And in total, you can see how the numbers I was citing are in the uses of funds. We've added to that cost of issuance, plus some resources, some cash of prepaid assessments and water funds that will offset some of the costs to come to the total bond issue size of $4,965,000. The next slide shows the debt service that would be required, and that is for all of these bond issues combined. And so we show the total principal and interest column, which is the fourth column over, for the bonds in total. By state law, in order to allow for uncollectible monies, there's a 5% added, so that the amount of levy is sized at 105% of total debt service. From that, we subtract the assessments plus interest, plus any utility bonds that go to pay for the utility type improvements. And that is the net calculated certified levy that is then certified to the county. And again, the city uses internal funds to pay all or a portion of that levy. We compare that to the 15-year option, and doing the same exercise, we're looking at about $430,000 of debt of the net levy for the first 10 years, and that drops to about 280,000. And if you want to flip back to the 20-year option, or I can just tell you that it was about 372,000 or 380,000 for the first 15 years, and then it drops to about 230,000. So that's the difference in what the total certified levy would be. And we can come back to that because I know the council will make a decision. As background, when you sell a bond, there are several people that are involved in the transaction. The blue chairs, bond counsel, municipal advisor, architect, all of those folks sit on your side of the table, the issuer. And in fact, I'm a fiduciary of the city moving forward, so I represent you in that transaction. On the other side, in the green chairs, is the underwriter, and that's the investor side, and they will be purchasing the bonds. And then in the middle, there are several folks that help translate or provide support for the bonds in between, and most importantly is the credit rating agency that puts a rating on these bonds that helps. And of course, the higher the credit rating, the lower the interest rate that you would pay. And I'm not sure where the pictures of that, it's coming out a little funky on my screen, but that's the story. And as background, this is just what everyone does. They're the different roles. So bond counsel, they create all the resolutions. They've created the one for this evening authorizing the sale of bonds. They make sure that the statutes, the processes are followed, and they rule on whether the bonds are taxable or tax exempt. And in this case, they're all tax exempt because they're for public improvements for the city. The underwriter is who purchases the bonds, and they either purchase them as a low bid on the day of sale, or they can negotiate that transaction, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. They also, then we have a paying agent. That is someone who collects the payments from the issuer and transmits it to the bondholders. The credit rating agency, that's a neutral third-party credit assessment of the issuer that's marketed along with your bonds. The municipal advisor, that's me. In this case, the fiduciary for the issuer. And what that means really is I can't advise you to do anything that if I weren't sitting in your chair, or if I were sitting in your chair, my advice has to be what I would do if I were you. It can't be based on the revenues or fees that I would make. And we advise on the feasibility, the structure, the terms. We manage the process, we coordinate all of these parties to help manage the transaction. And then after the sale, all of the debt management, including the tax reporting for the IRS and maintaining and watching for opportunities for refinancings. And then the Depository Trust Corporation, it's a clearinghouse, so that the issuer pays the paying agent, who pays DTC, and they actually get the interest payments and the payments to the individual bondholder. So that's just a little background about who's the player, who's involved in the transaction. I think if you click again, the top part will come. There we go. And this is about the bond issuance process itself. We are in the early stages, in the planning, referendum, and the documentation stage. And so we're starting to draft your official statement to market the bonds, assuming that you would approve it tonight. We're creating, we created this recommendation for this evening, if you will, a pre-sale document explaining all the impacts. And then you can see the next would be the credit rating and putting together the market materials, market by distributing the official statement, and then actually conduct the sale, and then closing after that, which is when the bond proceeds are transferred to you. And then the post-issuance compliance items I mentioned happen once you've closed. And the time frame in the little calendar below, shows that it's about a 3 to 4 month process. We've started this now in April, and we'll finish where you're actually getting your bond proceeds in the end of June. And so that'll early July by the time all the documentation is done. Next slide. So this is information about how a routine bond is done, but This is unusual, and as you've heard all through the beginning of the meeting, with COVID-19 impacts, it also affects bond sales. So this is the gray is a new insert that we put into all offering documents now, and we just let folks know that they've created volatility in the market, and we may pull a sale or we might reintroduce it. So we're telling them that we might change the method of sale in this pre-summary. It's all based on what we know today, but that may change because we might try to navigate the market a little fluidly for you, and we give the underwriters a heads up about that. And what that we're talking about is in this parameters resolution, it authorizes you to do a competitive sale, which is what we would see typically. We'd create the POS and take bids. But in this case, because from 1 week to the next, the interest rates can move 25, 50 basis points, or that's 1/4 to 1/2%. We ask for flexibility to either do a competitive sale, which is the track we'd start. But if we get a better offer from a bank or an underwriter for a direct negotiation, and we think it's lower than anything on the market, it gives us the flexibility to take that offer rather than wait for another council meeting to come back to get your permission, and then that offer goes away. Next slide, please. So the competitive sale, just to be clear, that's the method where proposals, the underwriter is selected by submitting proposals for the purchase of the new issue. And so they bid on a set time, set date, and the lowest bid wins. And so your underwriter is selected on the day of sale. Next slide, please. And that works when the markets are stable, if you have a strong credit rating, and it's very plain vanilla. Everybody understands what it is, so you can offer it almost as a product, but it's not. It's very customized. So that's when you use the competitive. And most of the time, if you have a general obligation bond, as you do, and what that means is you have revenue streams that you're planning to use, but the investors know ultimately if you don't have enough money from these other revenue streams, you're pledging to go ahead and levy if you need to. And that makes it something they expect that they see in the market all the time, and that's a typical bond. Next slide, please. The negotiated sale. The new issue of, well, what would happen in this case is the underwriter is basically selected prior to the sale based on an RFP proposal. And so they're selected based on their fees and their rates and so forth, and you select, and the reason you want to do that is because then you can talk about this bond issue and you can be flexible as to the date instead of picking a time. So the next slide will tell you why we would consider that. You use the negotiated transaction where there's unstable markets. You really don't have a unique structure here, but we might get few bidders, and timing will matter. And so it can be, you're kind of in the middle ground, that wouldn't go, but really what the reason we're looking to this, or the first couple of reasons, is our items, unstable markets and few bidders. So maybe it would make sense to work and bring down that. We've tried this successfully. We've tried a competitive sale, and then on the day the sale was supposed to happen, rates jumped up. We pulled the sale because another underwriter came forward and had a bid at much lower than anything we were estimating, and the city chose to take that. So that's why we look for flexibility. The next thing I'll talk about quickly is credit rating. As part of the process, we mentioned that you would go to the rating agency to get credit. The city's rating is very high. It's a AA+, so we are seeing right now that rating agencies are a little skeptical of government. Some have put a negative outlook across the board. It doesn't mean that they've given you a negative outlook. They're going to look at your cash, your management, all the things specific to you, and give you a credit rating. It's really based on your economic factors, your debt, your financial operations, your management, the policies and flexibilities, and then the legal pieces of the bond and your flexibility there. So, and what this does is the higher the credit rating, the lower your interest rates. So it's certainly worth getting the credit rating stamp on it. Next slide, please. And this is the chart. There are 3 rating agencies: Moody's, S&P, and Fitch. And the city has a rating in the AA plus category, and that is one notch from a AAA, which is the highest that you can get. And so the city uses S&P, and as you can see, there's AAA, then there are 3 categories of AA, then there are all the single A's, and then there are triple B's, and those are all still considered investment grade. So you're in a very high place at this time, and we hope that continues, but that will have a big factor, and that's part of this process. Do I have control of this? Next slide. I think I just wanted to make sure it was very clear what's in the resolution. Three points that are important to note. One is that it says that the council will has a desire to proceed with the sale, and it says you will do it by either competitive sale or, if necessary, negotiated or a negotiated private placement. A negotiated might be where you would do an RFP for underwriters and select them. A negotiated private placement is they may already have a buyer in hand and they might approach us and make an offer. And in either way, if we feel you'll come out with a lower interest rate, we would consider that. The second bullet points out under what circumstances you could navigate in this way, and that is the mayor and the city administrator would be authorized to approve the sale of the bonds as long as the aggregate amount of the bonds doesn't exceed $5.1 million and that total interest does not exceed 4.4%. So the amount of the bonds that we have are well within that. It's $4,965,000, which is well under that. And this is not meant to be tight. It's just meant to give a general parameter. They're not going to go out and sell a $10 million bond or something that you're not aware of. And the second parameter is looking at rates. We were forecasting rates in the 2.69 if you choose a 15-year bond, 303 in the 20-year range. And so 4% gives us some space to work with there too. And then the third item is that to let you know that they will negotiate it. They have the authorization to act, so you don't lose that bid or offer. But then all the documents would come back and get final approval by the city council. And then the last slide just talks about where we're going and what would happen in this process. And so tonight we're asking you to proceed with the issuance of the bonds. There would be a rating call set up for April 27th. We are proceeding down the path of assuming it will be a competitive sale, and that sale would occur on May 14th. And in that case, we would come back just as we usually do, and the city council would award the bonds. And then you'd have bond proceeds after that. What we might do is that date, May 14th, as we talked about, if we need to pull the sale or move it because rates moved on us. And again, we're seeing big movement and then settling and then big movement and settling. And so if it looks like it's going to be a big movement week, that could get moved out by a week or so. But we'll hopefully things will continue to stabilize. And that concludes my remarks, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Terry. Excuse me. Did I understand correctly? We have to select the term of the bond, and you say we have to select the process of bidding as well?
Actually, Mr. Mayor, the process would be determined. I think we're assuming it will be a competitive rate or a competitive method. And the only reason we would change from that is if markets become volatile. Then we would talk to the city administrator about taking a better offer if we can get one in the negotiated world. So I think this resolution allows us to do any of the three within the parameters of the $5.1 million, 4% interest rate, and having the mayor and the administrator approve it.
Okay.
There would be I think you mentioned a 15 or a 20-year discussion, and I think Mr. Terry wanted to talk to you about affordability and which one made more sense to you.
All right, Tom, did you have anything you wanted to add before we start discussing?
I wanted to run through real quickly the potential levy impact of the 15 versus the 20-year bond that's currently recommended. To do that, if you don't mind, I'd like to share my screen again, but have you take a look at, excuse me. So if we take a look at the 20-year option, The council has all seen this before. This is our cash fund or balance projection model for the capital projects fund. As the council knows, the capital projects fund is the primary funder of the debt that we're looking at issuing. It includes all the items that would normally be funded by property tax. So that would be the fire rescue truck and plow truck. So the capital equipment certificates, the police department renovation or addition, the roundabout project and the pavement rehab, the standby generation improvements are actually funded out of the sewer fund and so would not have any direct tax impact. As we know from past discussions with the council, even before we added the plow trucks to the debt issuance, with the project costs that we were looking at, especially with the increased costs with the PD addition, we knew that there was going to be some amount of levy. In order for the capital project fully fund and stay in the black, we would need to levy an additional $11,000 per year in order for us to maintain a positive balance within the fund. So for example, if we zeroed that out, the fund would go deficit after a period of time. So basically this is the gap we would have. So if we levy an additional $11,000 per year, conceptually we would be able to fully fund everything. Now, that being said, there is the possibility of having other revenues into the fund, such as the sweep that we do in certain years. If we come in under budget, our revenues are higher than projected, or both. Usually we have a good budget year, we have traditionally swept dollars into this fund. So hypothetically, if we were able to sweep $100,000 this year into the fund, that would improve the fund balance and would allow us to lower the fund, how much we would need to levy for on an annual basis, to a much lower dollar amount. Now, if you look at these dollars down here, this is how much we would have to increase the levy on an annual basis. So it would be a laddered step up. So it'd be $8,000 in 2021, an additional $8,000 in 2022, an additional $8,000 in 2023, and so on and so forth. So you would be looking at anywheres from a 1/3% up to possibly 3/4% of additional levy every single year in order to fill the gap. But that would be a way in which we could ladder the tax impact over a large number of years and keep the fund solvent. Are there any questions on the general concept of that? Okay, then that being said, what I'd like to do then is show the impact of the 15-year option. Now, in this case, we're not talking about $8 or $11 or $5,000. We're talking about $35,000 and an additional $35,000 every year for 6 to 8 years until we get up to the point where we are covering that gap. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so as a result, and even if we did include that a large sweep in there, let's see, it's $10,000, $100,000. You can see that it's not going to make a tremendous dent in there. You know, you're still going to be looking at, you're gonna need over $20,000 additional per year. So long and short, we are recommending going with the 20-year bond option, even though it will result at the end of the day probably in an additional $400,000 or so in interest over the term of the bonds. But the tax impact of a 15-year option is just significantly larger and well beyond what we felt we could recommend to City Council.
All right, thanks, Tom. Anyone have any questions or comments? Let's open it up. Don't be shy. Josh, you always have something to say. See, Prasad, you're go ahead.
To raise my hand. but then I couldn't figure out where the hand raising button was. What are you thinking, Mayor? You understand this world better than I do. You know, not to put you back on the spot and turn it back on you, but I mean, this is your world more than any of mine.
Yeah, I mean, 20 years is the only option I would support. I mean, I don't like raising taxes at all, but 20 years is feasible, and I think there's a way we can do that. That's where I'm at.
Okay,
Anyone else?
question, but I couldn't figure out where my little hand was. Okay, on the 15-year option, what happens once we're in the negative? That's extra that we're putting in? Is that what that is?
No, so the way we
Is
currently are proposing to fund the debt is out of the capital projects fund. If
Oh,
the capital
okay.
projects fund can't cover it, that's how much additional you're going to have to levy for
Okay.
it. And the assumption in that model is that all of our LGA is going into the capital projects fund. So we're basically funding the overwhelming majority of these capital purchases and projects
Mhm.
with our LGA dollars.
Okay. Okay. Just need a clarification. I didn't quite understand that.
Can someone clarify for me again the difference or the amount that we would save by doing the 15-year versus the 20-year? Does that pay off versus the amount that we're having to levy? I mean, do you understand that question, or am I not
No,
making sense?
it's a good question, Kate. The difference, it's just like when you finance anything else. Generally, the longer the term, the more interest that you're going to pay over the course of the bond. So as a rule, you try and shorten it to the shortest term you can afford to pay. In this case, if we went to a 15-year bond, we would save $400,000 in interest for all of the items. However, the tax impact or how much we would have to pay on an annual basis would be so much higher. So if you think of it this way, it's the same conversation when you're deciding between a 15-year mortgage and a 30-year mortgage, and you pay much more than the 30-year mortgage, but you might not be able to afford the monthly payment, that mortgage payment that you'd have with the 15. So we're saying it's a similar situation. We can reasonably accommodate the 20-year, but we can't. The 15-year would have a much more significant tax impact.
Okay. All right, perfect. I think the 20 years is the only one we can do then.
Any other comments or questions or items that they'd like to discuss on this? Okay.
Mr. Mayor, this is Terry. I was listening in on your earlier discussion about moving back the property taxes. And one other reason that that's dangerous is a lot of bonds that are outstanding rely on a property tax collection on February and August. So if you get a chance to talk to your lobbyists, this is an example. Your payments are due February and August, and we're counting on a December and June collection in order to make those payments. So we put a lot of bonds at risk also. Just a side note.
Thanks, Terry. Any other comments, questions? Okay. 20 years versus 15 years. Anyone opposed to going 20 years? Anyone prefer to go 15 years at all?
I prefer to do it, but we can't afford it, so that's
Well,
beside the point.
fair enough.
Yeah.
All right, Josh. Okay. Well, we have, so 20 years, I think, is what we're all in agreement to, unless someone speaks up. We have resolution 20-27 in front of us to adopt these. Any motions?
Motion to approve resolution 20-27 with the 20-year term.
Okay, motion by Berg.
Second.
Second by Timmerman. Any more discussion before we vote? Okay, we'll do a roll call vote. I'll vote first. I'll vote aye. Timmerman.
Aye.
Berg.
Aye.
Prasad,
Aye.
Novak.
Aye.
All right, passes 5-0 at 20 years. Resolution 20-27. Thank you, Terry.
Thank you. Have a great rest of the evening.
You too. Okay, on to reports. Administration.
I don't have anything to report unless there are any questions for me.
Is there anything to update the council with regarding our current state of emergency, the state stay-at-home order, anything like that?
No, the recent changes, the minor changes actually that the governor announced yesterday, and other than extending it, really don't have any significant impacts for us as a city as far as how we're currently operating. Things have kind of stabilized at this point with regards to operations, as both Corey and Brady have previously reported. They're kind of continuing very much close to normal operations. We've adjusted operations in City Hall with regards to people being in and out of the office on a rotating basis. I'm in every day, and one of our other staff is typically in each day on a rotating basis. I don't see that there's anything large, although I think as we start coming into budget season, we do have to keep in mind that the state went from having a surplus to what's probably going to be a substantial deficit. And for those of us that have been in the game for a while, the first place the state goes when they're short on cash is the cities. So there's a couple things we should be aware of. One is there may be an impact, there's possibly an impact to LGA. There's also the possibility of delay, as I've mentioned before, as to when we receive. Although I wouldn't anticipate that to be more than a couple of months if they do go there. And I don't know how likely that is. It's just been whispered, so to speak, at this point. Other things we have to be aware of is that other aids or grants or dollars that have been out there, you know, there tends to be aid in good times, grants and things like that. A lot of those programs tend to dry up or get defunded during these types of times. So we just have to be aware of that, as there's not going to be a lot of options for us to get supplementary help for financing programs or capital projects over the next few years. I do anticipate that we will be keeping City Hall closed as long as there's a stay-at-home order in place. Our call volume on the telephones has dropped significantly and pretty much revolves around permits and other day-to-day service items, but our overall activity at office that way has dropped. That's good because with the current operations, it's just not as efficient to work remotely, et cetera. I know that our community development staff has continued to be very busy. Renee can talk about that later in the meeting. We are now getting back to the point in administration where we're moving away from COVID response into day-to-day activities.
All right. Okay, Public Works. Corey's not on, I don't think. Oh,
No, I'm here. I have nothing to add.
Got a mustache and everything. Look at you.
Uh-huh.
All right. Got nothing to add? All right.
Nothing to add.
On to police.
Good evening, Council. A couple of points I want to bring up. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
All right. We have started our new officer, Brenton Karkuff. Started 2 weeks ago, just finished his second week of training, doing a really good job. His police background has helped him, and he's been advancing very quick. We don't anticipate shortening his field training, but it's making it go a lot smoother. And if towards the end we feel he's more advanced and ready to be on his own, we will do that. We're looking forward to getting him on his own right about June, if not July at the latest. And he'll be able to work those extra overnight shifts. So we'll have back to our close to 24-hour coverage scheduled. To jump on to what Tom said about COVID, just to give you an update for our department. Overall, we've been operating at just about our normal capacity. We have still continued to modify our response to medical calls to where we're only going to emergent calls. We've only used 2 N95 masks and normal glove amounts. So our PPEs are doing very well. We've been continuing to handle most of our calls by phone to limit our exposure. When we do have to be in someone's presence to take a call or to collect evidence, we are keeping socially distant still. We have just about next week, we will have converted all of our PPE to reusable PPEs so they can be cleaned, disinfected. And what that is, it's been my goal the whole time, is to get those reusable PPEs and get them for as many as we can for the fire department. So the disposable PPEs can be gotten to the people that really need them. This week earlier today, Tom and I were on a meeting with the sheriff's department and all the other chiefs and city administrators for the county. And one of the things that continues to come up is that our emergency workers and our elderly care facilities really need these PPEs. And so we have had 3 to 4 people that have come, well, 4 people now that have come to the police department, donated PPEs, disposable ones, and who have called about it. And I've been directing them to locate a elderly care facility that may need them. Today at the meeting, the sheriff's department stated that they will take any donated disposable PPEs, new condition, or replaceable ones, and then get them to people as they request them. So for all of you and for friends, or if you hear about people looking to donate that, that the Sheriff's Department, the Emergency Operations Center is a place you can do that. I did have somebody bring in 20 fabric masks. Since we already have masks that are replaceable, I was able to contact Market Village and get them to the manager there to distribute to their residents. So other than that, they said they're in pretty good shape as well. So if you know anybody, it can go to the Sheriff's Department. But as Tom said, we're in really good shape. The county overall is, all the cities are reporting they're operating normal capacity. We have, I'm knocking on wood here, we have had no law enforcement or emergency responders that have come down with COVID. There are probably, maybe Tom can jump in at the moment, 6 that were self-quarantining because family members came into contact with somebody that had COVID. But overall, the county law enforcement's in great shape. The city's in great shape. And we're really excited to kind of move past this and get everything open back up. Any questions?
Thanks, Brady. Anyone have questions? I didn't really open that up for any of the other reports, so I guess anyone that's previously given a report. Does any council members have questions or anything?
Otherwise, I can tell you our community is doing really well. We have not seen an uptick in domestics or disturbance calls. The parks, about the only complaint we get consistently is the skate park. Kids jumping the fence and going in there. And usually a citizen will shag them out and then call us. By the time we get there, they're gone. Otherwise, you know, we're just not seeing what is happening around the country of an increase in domestic disturbances. We've done a Facebook post about Southern Valley Alliance for Battered Women. They're seeing an uptick in the county of use of their services, but the city of Elko Market, we're doing really well. So I'm knocking on wood again, but we seem to be holding our own.
Thanks, Brady.
Right.
Fire department, assuming there's nothing there. Engineering.
There's one thing under fire department, Mr. Mayor.
There is.
Yep. Just a real quick item. The fire department has modified their minimum performance requirements in response to COVID-19. Firefighters have a minimum number of trainings that they have to make and number of calls they have to make. They are currently suspending attendance requirements at training and canceling those trainings that they can. The reason being is you're getting, 25 firefighters in a small room or small space in order to do training. That's not viewed to be advisable. to a certain degree when they're on calls. They can exercise a certain amount of social distancing or limit the number of people that are in close proximity. So they have made that administrative decision that they're going to change that, modify that requirement.
Okay. Engineering.
We
I saw Richard.
I'm here, yeah. We have 3 developments planning to resume construction next week. That would be Dakota Acres 2. They'll start on the utility work to add more townhome lots. That'll be a fairly small project. They plan to start on sewer on Monday morning. Pete's Hill will be starting up again. I would expect to see perhaps some grading happening there and maybe some utility work. We don't know. They didn't say exactly, but they will be working next week. And then Boulder Heights has some work to do. They'll be coordinating with small utilities to make way for getting their lift station control panel and their lift station pumps put in and up and running. And also starting, I think, later in the week on 273rd, getting that ready for paving. We will have 2 people in town. One will be Bob Flaws, who I think you all know and has been quite familiar with the city. He'll be the lead observer. And then we have Joe Hausman. Joe is a surveyor that is interested in learning about civil engineering technology. So he's transferring to our municipal engineering department and will be shadowing Bob for a short time, at least until he kind of gets up to speed on what we typically look for inspection. Even after he may not be shadowing, he will be supported by Bob or me or the other project managers, phone call away. And you might be pleased to know Joe is an Elko New Market resident.
All right.
So we're mindful of the cost to developers. We won't be billing for Joe while he's shadowing and while there's not sufficient work to justify 2 people. Just I wanted you to know that. So if you see 2 guys standing there the whole day, you're not being charged for both until such time that Joe's up and running and there's sufficient work for 2, or he's on his own and Bob is only providing phone support. So I just wanted to let you know that.
Are the developers going to be aware of that? They're seeming to be pretty sensitive towards the engineering costs.
We've not had that conversation with them. We just learned this afternoon that all 3 would be working next week. So, and I'm not sure how I guess I can, for the ones that I'll work with Renee to make sure they know that we do have a plan to monitor costs within limits. There's things we can't control, but to the best we can, we're going to try and use 1 person to cover these 3 jobs, and I'll work with Renee to let them know that.
Thanks, Rich. Okay. Let's see, what do we have next? Community development. Is there anyone?
Yep. Yeah, I'm here. I think Tom and I are gonna tag team on this. Just wanted to let the council know that we continue to work with the technical advisory committee that was formed following the joint meeting of the county and the CDA and the city council in January. We had our 2nd meeting this past week, early on Monday. We did receive indication from the CDA that they would be willing to support approximately $200,000 in annual funding towards the project. And then they are asking the city to waive the remaining outstanding debt they are currently paying on the water and sewer trunk charges for the Scott County CDA building in our community. We believe that amounts to about $12,000, and then they could add that additionally to the debt service on the project. So we're continuing to work on it and look at options for moving the project forward. They did indicate they don't know how COVID is going to affect their finances because a large portion of their revenue, the majority of their revenue comes from rent payments from their facilities and from property tax disbursements. And those two are kind of up in the air to see how they'll be affected. Or what their impact will be. So we kind of agreed that until later in July, they probably wouldn't be willing to make any big commitments. So I'll let Tom add anything else that he.
So when we previously discussed with council this topic, the general feedback we had from the council was that the options, reserves really wasn't an option because we don't have flush reserves. Raising property taxes was not really an acceptable option, or raising rates specifically for revenue to help fund the project also were not very good options. One of the other options, of course, that was discussed was this idea of forgiving the remaining debt service payments that they have related to the development fees, utility development fees for the Marketplace project. The Marketplace Village project has debt service payments annually of in the ballpark of $29,000 between water, sewer, and stormwater for connection and trunk fees and area charges on an annual basis through 2025. And they're asking that to be waived at this point. So within the stormwater fund, I'm really not worried about the $4,000 loss in revenue. The council is fully aware of the projections we have in that fund, and I think we can absorb the $4,000. However, that revenue loss within water and sewer would have an impact. And just to give you an idea of that, I want to walk through a couple of things. One, we have updated some of the assumptions within the utility fund analysis. There's a couple of changes that we've made. We've made some adjustments with regards to the timing of when we expect to be collecting relative to the assessed development fees for Christmas Pines, Pete's Hill, and Ridgeview Estates. We've also accelerated Ridgeview Estates. If you recall, previously in the model last fall, we had had a miscellaneous future anticipated plat that would come in 2023. Well, we now have Ridgeview Estates, and we think it's reasonable that they will plat in 2020. They would be looking, we anticipate, a similar assessment agreement to what we've provided to Christmas Pines and to Pete's Hill. And so the first payment would be received in 2021. Similar to the other projects, we're assuming a 5-year build out and then a balloon payment at the end of the 3 years related to the assessments that they have due. So we've made that change in the model. The other thing that I've done is further down in the model is we now know that Quick Trip is intending to do a project in 2021. And Renee's done some research on similar projects recently within the metro area to get an idea of how many SAC units they might be determined to be. And so we've plugged in at this point a swag of the equivalent of 10 SAC units between their acreage charge and their connection fees, and plug that into the model as well. So once we do all of that, we're looking at a model that's a little bit different. We actually do see a little bit of improvement both in the wastewater and in the water fund, and that's primarily due to the acceleration. Two things. One, the acceleration of the Ridgeview Estates by 2 years. So we're getting that additional revenue. Plus, we also have the inclusion of the Quick Trip, which, based on what we've seen in other communities, will be a fair number of SAC units related to that project. So that being said, the model still looks pretty, is very consistent with what we've shown the council previously. One of the other assumptions we do want the council to start considering is the likelihood of Dakota Acres Second Edition. This is the apartment building project, and the first phase of that, which is 28 units, has been planned now for over a year. The developer has been working on it. All of the contact we have had with the developer is that they are working on it. They do own the property, so it's not an option situation that they can walk away from. They have a strong interest in the property. But that being said, we haven't seen any material progress on our side of the table in several months. And so given the COVID-19 and the potential slowdowns within the market, staff is starting to have some concerns about the likelihood of that project. And so when we're going through showing what the impact would be of waiving these fees, we'd like to show you one, assuming that that project is there, and an alternate where we basically deleted the revenues associated with that project. So if we start with option one, where that's included, what I would do is go into the water fund, and I'm just throwing in an expense line item, $12,579. That is the annual revenues that we're receiving from the CDA. And then I would be doing the same thing in the wastewater fund of $13,263. If you take a look at that, you will note that there is a slight drop in the long-term trend related to the wastewater fund and in the water fund, and that's a result of a slightly depressed trend line with regards to our projected fund balances. But I do feel that in this scenario, we can absorb the loss of that revenue as part of getting the deal done with the CDA, given the long-term benefits of getting the utilities extended to the interchange. The alternate option is the what if the Dakota Acres Second Edition project phase 1 did not occur. Under those scenarios, that does have a very depressing effect over the next 3 years, 2 to 3 years within each of the funds. You'll notice that it pushes the trend line from somewhere out here over to here, and it does extend 2021, depresses our projected balance in 2021 quite a bit more. You'll see in the water fund, it's much more significant. You'll notice that we're very close to bottoming out. And then again, the trend line is flattened and pushed out in that one as well. In both cases within the scenario, it does show that we managed to stay afloat. That's again, helped significantly by the Ridgeview Estates coming online and the fact that we have Quick Trip projected to come in. Now, one thing I do like to do is show the council the sensitivity within the model. We did this previously. If we take a look at, this assumes that we receive everything that we have projected that I've identified for the council down here. What if we only receive 80% of that? So 4 out of 5 housing units that we've identified. We now are barely staying afloat in the sewer fund, and we are actually projected to go again, same thing in the water fund. So it's very close. So there's a high degree of sensitivity within the funds over the next couple of years. In all modeling cases, we do tend to see a upward slope because we do have that steady incremental development. But right now our reserves are not flush. We're at a projected finish the year around $100,000 within each of the funds, or a little less. And so we don't have a lot of bounce within those funds for any margin of error. So I just want the council to be aware of the risk that's there in both of these cases, especially as we start moving into this COVID-19, post-COVID-19 environment in the next few months. So the question that we're asking the council tonight basically is, do you want to move forward at this point with the understanding that we would forgive the remaining balance that's owed to us by the CDA for the new Market Village project?
Okay. Any thoughts, council?
So you're looking for direction as if we want to just keep moving forward, Tom?
Yes. We asked the CDA to basically say, if you want us to put more skin in the game, what does it need to be? And they told us. And this is the best analysis I can give you at this point. We can play around all you want with the assumptions in the model, but this is as good as but it's still a model. But based on the previous assumptions that we've had and have updated, we feel to be more realistic from what's happened. Will happen. This is the best we can predict.
Okay.
Okay. Tom, I don't suppose this is information that you shared with the CDA at all when discussing our capacity to help out further with this project?
We've had extensive discussions with the CDA about our capacity to be able to support and help further with this project. In fact,
Do they see this though?
yes.
Okay.
Not this version, we have updated it in the last few days based on some of the information related to Quick Trip and some of the information related to Ridgeview Estates. But we've shown them in the past our capacity and the sensitivity within the fund. The CDA just simply maintains two things. One, they feel they would like to have they would like the city to have more skin in the game. But in addition to that, they're also indicating that they feel they are in a precarious position. They had mentioned several times in our last meeting that of all the years for us to come and ask, this is probably the most difficult year that they can remember for us to ask that question. Josh has his hand raised.
Yeah, no.
I can't see when people have their hands raised at all. So.
No, I mean, I think I suggest or support continuing to move forward with it. I mean, we can play around with the assumptions, and certain phases may not happen. Other phases that we're not even looking at right now do come into existence and offset some of that. So, I mean, I think that's the conservative approach, which I appreciate you, Tom, taking and making sure that we understand the risk. But no, I fully support continuing to move forward, especially if it's only $12,000 a year. I mean, this is, I think, the best we could have hoped for.
Any objections or any thoughts? Any further thoughts from anyone?
I agree with Josh. I think we need to move forward and try to be optimistic that things are not going to be as bad as they're being, not as bad as they could be. So we're just going to be optimistic that things are going to go along well. And hopefully this will help us get development out there sooner, which will help offset some of this. And I think we have to go forward.
I agree. Okay, and Josh.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree too. I wouldn't even say it's necessarily being optimistic. I think it's realistic. I think we trust the market, and we need to trust the way this, I mean, trust and optimistic, I guess, could be the same thing. But yeah, I'm fully in support of moving forward. Amanda, did you have anything to add on it? You've been quiet.
I agree with everything that everyone's saying, so I'm in support of moving forward. I don't have anything additional to add.
Okay. All right, Tom, you feel you have what you need?
I do. Given that feedback, we'll be moving forward with Baker Tilly on the financial analysis. That's going to be somewhere in the $8,000–10,000 range for some of the work that they're going to be doing. We can cover that out of our professional services budget that we have within our budget this year. And we will be working with the CDA on making sure that we have a deliverable that provides for both the work committee that we're on, but also for the governing bodies for both the CDA and the city to be able to decide at the end, this makes sense, we should pull the trigger, etc. Our goal at this point is probably looking for a target date of getting a commitment in July or August, probably more likely August of this year. Part of that is the CDA, as Renee mentioned, they're going to need that long to see what the impact is coming out of COVID before their board is going to be able to make any decisions related to a larger financial commitment on their part. I think that's reasonable. With the economic slowdown that we're likely to see, I don't know that we're missing anything by pushing start of construction to spring of next year, which we would still be on track for at this particular juncture.
Okay. So moving on. This community development, parks. Anything to add from parks? Okay.
Couple of things, Mr. Mayor, if I could. One, the recreational specialist position.
Whoops, sorry.
I Here, Mark.
Yes, I am here. I forgot to unmute.
Okay.
I'll put you on video so you can get the full effect.
Oh, perfect.
There we go.
So
Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, so Mark and I have been working on the recreational specialist position. Actually, much to our delight and great surprise, in the last 2 days of the posting period, we ended up with 5 total applications. Now, that being said, there are only 2 of those 5 candidates that are arguably meet minimum qualifications for the position based on the posting that we have. After reviewing the applications and the pool that we received, Mark and I think we should do similar to what we did with Public Works last year, is we need to go back and revise the job description and take a look at the minimum qualifications to provide us with possibly a larger and better pool of candidates. So we'll be returning to the City Council at this next meeting to get a revised job description approved, and then we'll be reposting for another 2 weeks, and then we'll be moving forward with the pool we have at that time.
Okay. Mark, do you have anything to add since?
Just quickly, thanks for approving the Twins grant. I'll fill it in and send it out tomorrow, and we should have the cash here in a couple of weeks. The second thing is we did make the first cut on the $50,000 per playgrounds application. And if we do happen to get that, that will go to Woodcrest, which I hope we'll be back to you sometime soon on that rehab. That's part about years old, and talked to a lot of residents over there. And so we'll be working on that, I think, a little bit this summer, and this fall, hopefully get that done. We did get the installation and the equipment for the old Elko City Hall Park there, so we'll be rehabbing that in first 2 weeks of May here. So a lot of activity going on, and as far as the playgrounds go, I get a lot of questions on that as well too. Most cities have continued to keep them closed. We'll see what happens here about May 4th with the governor and his speech and his talk there. So right now it's a standstill in that sense. Trails, parks continue to be open, and except for the skate park, as Brady mentioned, where we've had some people climb over the fence. People have been pretty good about staying off the playgrounds as well here too. So hopefully soon we'll be able to reopen them, because after all, that's what parks are all about. And but for now, we decided to kind of keep them closed until we get further notice on that. Any questions?
No, I see the fire rescue days status on the screen.
Yep, I have a couple other items, Mr. Mayor. Fire rescue days, as you may have heard, a lot of communities are already starting to cancel their community festivals over the summer. We've been in contact with most of the major event organizers for the events that occur during fire rescue days. And the general, basically, we're taking a look at how much lead time do we need to cancel larger events, large community festivals. Their lead and planning time is much greater than ours. We're still small enough that a lot of the work is done in the last month and a half prior to the event. So at this point, we're planning to reconnect with the stakeholders the first full week in May, and basically at that point start making decisions if we're canceling the festival or certain events within the festival based on the information we have at that time. But at some point there's going to be, just because of the event, we have to make it. So I just wanted to put that out there for the council and let you know that we've been have been having those discussions, and cancellation is a possibility at this point. Wagner Park reservations, as Mark has reported numerous times, our park shelter is extremely popular. It's rented pretty much every weekend and every day of the weekend through the summer for family reunions, graduation parties, family get-togethers, everything wedding receptions, everything you can imagine. At this point, on a weekly basis, we're taking a look at cancellation 30 days out. Given the governor's order, we will be canceling everything through May 4th at this particular point, and we're continuing to look at it on a rolling 30-day basis. We are in the process of notifying everybody that has reservations in May that there is a possibility of cancellation, that will notify them at least 21 days in advance, and they should start looking for an alternative option in case there is a cancellation. Lastly, Mark did provide his park and recreation update in the packet. So
remind me when fire rescue day is that scheduled for the last weekend?
That is correct, Mr. Mayor. Last full weekend.
So we're talking probably early May when the decision would have to be made.
That would be correct.
All right. Well, I guess we'll stay tuned. Anyway, any questions? I mean, that sounds a pretty big deal. Council.
Is there any update on the Parks Commission posting?
We did not get any additional applications. I guess I would, at this point, unless the council otherwise directs, we would schedule interviews with the candidates that we have.
I don't hear anyone objecting, so.
Okay.
Any other questions on any of this? All right. Thanks, Mark. I know you worked hard. This is the funnest time for you, so I appreciate your work.
Kate, Mr. Mayor, Kate has a question.
It's just a general question. Is Joe the only one that sounds funky to you guys, to me? He's got, it's, I don't know, it's muted or something.
Yeah.
He's got almost like Darth Vader.
Yeah,
That's exactly what it sounds like, is Darth
Sounds-
Vader.
Weird to me too.
Okay.
Sounded normal Joe-ish to me, but.
So is that something on my end or is that something on Joe's end? Because I can't even make out what he's saying.
I think
It's Joe's end.
Joe's end.
Okay.
Might be internet connection or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Tell his kid to stop playing video games for a minute.
Yeah. Kick everybody off the internet.
All right. So no one really understands anything I'm saying. Is that kind of what I'm getting?
We can, but it's very hard.
You do sound like Darth Vader.
Perfect. I will, all right. I will log off and log back on. That's what I'm doing. Tom, since no one here really understands what I'm saying, if you want to go through the rest of the reports.
Okay. So I talked to all the various council representatives of various committees, et cetera. Dawn did not indicate that she had any updates related to CCC. Is that correct, Dawn?
That's correct. There's nothing to update.
On the
We had
other
meetings, so.
And that seems to be and that's the theme, is that a lot of the various committees have not been meeting. So Scale hasn't had any meetings. Joe indicated there's nothing to report. Minnesota Valley Transit Authority, there was a update that was provided to the council earlier today. Same with the I-35 Solutions Alliance, and Kate indicated that there was nothing to report related to the Chamber of Commerce. Okay. With that being said, we'll need to move to closed meeting. Joe, are you connected and less robotish at the moment?
I don't know. Yeah, I guess you tell me. I sound normal.
You're good. You are good.
Better.
Normal.
All right. So there was nothing left in reports, right? I missed that for a little bit. So pursuant to Minnesota Statute 13D 05, Division 3C, the City Council will now close the meeting to discuss the offer of acquisition of the real property located at 461 Main.
What I'll be asking